Hi, I'm Diane Smith, and you're listening to Gospel Tangents,
the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. What were reactions of Mark's extended family? We're going to find out from two of his cousins, Michelle Stone and Diane Smith, and they'll talk about what happened or how they felt when Mark blew himself up. Did they think he was guilty or innocent? So we'll find out more about the extended family's reactions. You won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out.
When I lived in Orem and had a bunch of little kids, and I was driving down Center Street when I heard on the radio about the last bombing, and it looked like they had found things that in the back of Mark's car that indicated he may have been culpable.
Mm-hmm.
And it was...
Did the news reports say that they thought that he was the bomber?
I thought you said that it was as soon as you found out he was bombed, because they announced Mark is bombed and there are some questions, is basically...
There's some questions because there were some things in his trunk that were questionable. And I knew. I remember exactly where I was. It's a seminal moment of where I was in the car that I thought, oh, well, that makes sense. Because having had those experiences and knowing...
Other people have said the same thing. The things came together in this instant. The chemistry set, the
everything.
The deceit, it was like...
His
oh my
wife
gosh,
was
it's him.
His wife was a sweetheart,
Yeah.
and like I said, we worked together. I was in their home doing a bright music party back then, and I always would set up a display, and so they had a dining room table, and it had papers on it, and so I said, Dory, I'm just going to move these over and set it here, and Dory said, no, you cannot touch anything on this table, it's Mark's. And she said,
Is this in the basement?
No, this was
in
on
upstairs.
the dining room table.
And he had stuff on the table and you didn't touch it no matter what?
He had stuff on the table, and I said, is it okay if I just move it over to set some things? And she said, absolutely not. This is off limits, and...
Don't touch Mark's things. Like she knew, I don't touch Mark's things.
And she didn't look at them either. Everything was, he had said, don't look, don't touch, and so she didn't. And so I had to make other arrangements because
she just had that kind of sweet, simple personality of, not
questioning.
So even if it was out there on the kitchen table, she knew not to look at it.
Right, right. She'd been told not to look and not to touch, and
which is probably why their relationship worked. I know. I was like, she's different from
me. than
I'm sorry. Get that off the kitchen table.
No, why don't you want me to look? Yeah. That would be me. But and so it was those kinds of experiences over that lifetime that just coalesced into, okay, now we know.
So you knew instantly that you thought when he got blown up, that third bomb, that it was him. Mm-hmm. Did you talk to the police or anything? Or?
Oh, no.
Well, there wasn't what are you going to say? I think it was him. I mean, because I have other family members that also were like, but...
Because Dory was in disbelief, right? It couldn't be him.
Right.
Mark's parents didn't believe it was him.
Oh, well, you've got to tell that story.
Well, I have always wondered, because Aunt Lou was the mother, and I think...
As a mom, raising a kid like that, you'd be worried about them.
Really worried. Mm-hmm. Because Uncle Willie was steadfastly, if Mark says he didn't do it, he didn't do it. And Uncle Willie was 100%. And I just wonder if, in my mother heart, if Aunt Lou wondered if maybe he did. And that, I think, is
so painful.
Sad.
But that's something that you can't talk to her about,
right?
Oh,
no, we would never.
Never.
We would never.
She won't be watching this.
Even talking about this is uncomfortable because we don't want... we don't want any of her family members, like, she's the priority.
Right.
You know, she,
And-
like this.
And
this
neither
sweet
one of
woman.
us are an authority. We just have stood on the periphery and watched this. The priority is protecting that family and making sure that they are dealt with in love and compassion. And so if people, you know, in the notes say, she should have known, she should have, you know, all of that stuff, how can you possibly judge a mother that is doing everything that they can to raise children the best way that you know how?
So our
So
other,
you wonder if she
I
reacted like you
wonder
did?
at that
like,
point if she just thought,
as a mom, she was a full-time mom, just like I am. I know my kids. I know their tendencies. I'm concerned about unkindness in a personality I see. You know what I mean? She would have been very. I am projecting that it's hard for me to believe that she somewhere deep down. I think that pride in that meeting, like the pride of their boy, was like, he turned out okay, yay! That's
He's
you know,
putting
like it
Well,
all turned out good.
Let me ask you about this, though, because the salamander letter was like scandalous. You know?
Yeah.
The-
Yeah, that's a good question.
How was, do you know, I mean, do you remember when that came out? What was
Oh,
your
yeah.
reaction, and what was
yeah.
his parents' reaction?
I don't know what their reaction was, but his
Michelle,
was,
are you old enough to remember that?
No,
Salamander letter?
I have faint memories. I'll come back to it.
Okay.
I'll let her tell and then.
But it was, I think, more, well, this is what it says, and he's not hiding anything. He's not.
And it's been
you know,
authenticated?
yeah, it's been.
I think what I've heard, there was a feeling of, it's going to work out. We're going to find out. God,
all you need to do is go back and Gordon B. Hinckley gave a talking conference that was, for me, again, one of those moments I will always remember that talk, because in the family we had so many questions about these types of things, and so many people had lost their faith over the blessing to Joseph Smith's oldest son and the salamander letter and those types of things. And they actually had, because it had been authenticated, they had based their faith on proof rather than on testimony. And so as a result, there was a loss of intellectual people in the church who left because of that. And so, excuse me, Gordon B. Hinckley spoke in conference, and I'm paraphrasing, but I can remember this because it burned into me, that he said there are things that have come to light and we do not know the answer of the things that have come to light. But God knows, and I know that God knows, and at some point we will understand all of these things. My faith is in the Savior and in my Heavenly Father. Therefore, my faith is not shaken by the things that have come.
Those are the
Now-
conversations I remember hearing. We're like, we don't understand yet, but you know.
But someday we will.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was so interesting to hear him talk about the difference between supposed proof and actual testimony and a knowledge within your bones that someday we'll understand. We don't now, and that's okay. And so I think that's where we were trying to come from. And after I heard him give that conference talk, for me, that just solved everything, because I knew where my testimony was grounded and where it was based. And sure enough, we found out not too long later.
Well, and I want to tell the story of Uncle Willie, why he. So this is, and I'm telling this secondhand, right? So this is what we understand, is that he did sit with Mark and say, "Son, did you do this?" And Mark, "Dad, of course not, and
Oh,
that's
he did say that. Oh, wow.
this is, I wasn't there.
Secondhand. Yeah.
But this is what I was raised
Some
being
historians
told.
would throw that out.
And so anyway, so Uncle Willie was like, okay, and they made their family video. They were fully in his corner because he was like, I believe you, son.
And so this is after the third bomb has gone off. He's
when he
in
was
the
under
hospital or
investigation.
something. Yeah.
And trial. Uncle
Yeah, they were
Willie
on
was
trial.
on the front row.
Supporting him, and then what I have been told is that after he was convicted, well, he confessed, and
Yeah, it was a plea bargain.
and Uncle Willie was like, son, and again it was that laugh in his face, like, you're such an idiot, and that
Mark laughed in his dad's face? Really?
And it killed my Uncle Willie.
Well, it broke his mind.
It broke him.
It broke his mind.
And he was never the same and died.
Tell the last time you remember seeing him.
The last time I saw my Uncle Willie, it was in a van that was taking handicapped adults to a workshop. And he was sitting in the front seat of the van, didn't recognize me, he was broken at that point because he had so firmly believed his boy and was there 100% to support him, and it was just another time that Mark
Laugh on
laughed.
his face. I think this is why, like, of course, I mean, I don't want to minimize at all from the victims' families. That, it's just important to remember that there are more victims. I think Mark's parents were victims of this in a really profound way, and it's really quite tragic. But yeah, what happened to Uncle Willie? I did talk about how happy I was to learn that Aunt Lou's community rallied around her. She was called as the Stake Relief Society president at some point after, so she wasn't. That made me love Mormons. That's how she was embraced and treated. And I think when she was released, all the sisters had made her this beautiful quilt that hung in her house forever. And so it was beautiful to think of this as a family story, and how like she lost her son, she lost her husband. I guess something my mom had said, and was, not only did he kill people, like in my mom's LDS paradigm, like, is he a son of perdition? You know what I mean? Like, are these questions that they need to be asking about their child? Like it was really, really bad, hard stuff. And so there was something else I was going to say. Oh, I also think that one thing that really touches me is that Aunt Lou, she lived in Salt Lake, in Utah, I think, until she was 89.
Oh, older than that.
89 or 90, until she moved to be closer to a child, but one of her daughters. But she went every single week to the prison to visit Mark all of those years, her entire life, until she had to move out of Utah.
Really?
She went every single week and visited her son.
Well, the reason I ask, I know Shannon Flynn had visited Mark a few times, but then within the last 5 years, I know Shannon tried to visit Mark, and Mark said, no, I don't want to see you.
And maybe it was when his mom moved away. I mean, I don't know. I just know that she went every single week, which is, I think it's about the most...
to mother love.
Yeah, well, and it wasn't out, she never denied, she wasn't, I think it's just a testament to who she is as well, like I think that is a profound...
Do you think she's forgiven Mark for what he's done?
I have no way of saying that. I know she loves him.
Well, it sounds like it if she's visiting him every week. How can you do that
There's
if you don't
I know
forgive?
that she has still like tried to be a caring grandmother to those children. She wants them to know the good family history. So I don't think we could ever speak to... Like I said, I think she knew who he was his whole life. Like my other cousin, who they grew up together, her parents, so Aunt Lou's the youngest and her dad is the next oldest, and what she was told is that God sent Mark to them to give him the very best chance so that he could have the very best chance at choosing. And, you know, that's what she was raised on, is you know, that's, I guess, how they looked at it. How could this happen? And it was, they did this, you know, God sent him here to give him the best chance. And so I think that Aunt Lou is as close to a saint as you get, I think, from my perspective outside looking in.
And I don't know that forgiveness even has to come into it. It's just that she is full of unconditional love.
These were the cards she was dealt. How was she going to play them?
So,
wow.
It's a whole different take on the family and on Mark than you get from people who are armchair quarterbacking on supposed motives.
Why didn't everybody notice this?
Yes.
Well, Mark had been practicing his whole life, it sounds like, to fool people.
And it's the human element. It's the spiritual core of families, where we're going to get some rotten apples in families, and we still are chartered to be the best parents we can and love them and do everything we can to make sure that they have the best chance of making good decisions and choices. But free agency is that double-edged sword. I want it for myself. I don't want it for my kids. and yet that free agency comes into play, and we can't be responsible for another person's choices.
Well, I think we should go back to also to look at, because people try to attribute motive. He was betrayed by the church. He was, but when you see, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, because I know there's going to be some skeptics out there that are just going to be like, well, how in the world would you not know? Could you see any behavior in Mark's parents that would have enabled him to continue to fool people?
Oh, you mean were they in on it at all?
No, not that they were in on it, but that...
Or they enabled him?
Because I know you've said that they were loving parents, but could it be that because they were so loving, they enabled him to do the terrible things that he did?
I don't think they were permissive at all. They
No,
were definitely not permissive.
I know that if he wanted a chemistry set, they got him a chemistry set. But they would have
Well, that was because he was going to be pre-med at one time, right?
Yeah, and they would have no way of knowing what was the motivation for the things that he wanted.
How about one, and I don't know, you might not be privy to this information, but it sounded like a mission was very important. Could we say that they forced him to go on a mission?
Do you want to go? There was definitely the culture in our family. The boys got their Eagle Scout before they got their license. The boys went on missions. I think there was definitely a we were. It was a good old Mormon family. I think there was absolutely the expectation. I don't know that Mark pushed. I don't know that there was ever. I don't know that there were ever battles. It was we were raised in the church.
Was Mark an Eagle Scout, as far as you know?
Oh, I don't know, but some people would know. I would guess yes.
I would guess.
Because I know there are some families that are like, you're not going to get your license until you get your Eagle Scout. And stuff
that was our family.
That was your family.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you think that was Mark's family?
Maybe, but it wasn't in my family, or it wasn't like a. It was just like, oh, okay. It was. This is how we do it. Like, you don't drink coffee and you don't drink Coke and you go on a mission, and it was.
It was the expectation of the way that we were raised to be active LDS. These are the things that we do. And
yeah, but that doesn't mean it had to be domineering. No.
Yeah, so that's another question. You talked about the water skiing and things like that. So it sounds like Mark's parents could be really fun, quote unquote fun. Do you have a sense on the daily life where were they really hard on Mark? Were they too easy on Mark? They let him do whatever he wanted?
This would be so judgmental outside looking in. And the other thing I want to say is, again, there are parents that are way too easy on their kids and parents who are way too hard on their kids. Their kids turn out how they turn out.
That's just not something we can tell.
It's not relevant, and it's not it's not at all relevant. And I guess
we all
my
like to
question
play armchair psychologists, right?
Right.
Right. And my question is, how many of us? I consider myself a really good mom. I consider Di a really good mom. I'm not convinced I could raise Mark to not be what he was. I'm just thankful that he's not my child. So like all of this looking in is because it is kind of the judgment of the parents, which is so irrelevant to this. I mean, to what Mark did. Like, Mark went on his mission and they talk about how he was so interested in church history. Why was he interested in church history? Why was he buying books with blank pages? He was planning this his whole life. I mean, don't know if he knew what route it was going, but this is who he was forever. Right? And this was the avenue he could best manifest it in. In fact, we should talk about the Letterman jacket, but you were going to say something.
No, I feel like that's an unfair question, because that question would attribute blame to his parents, and that's
there are
not...
people that are going to ask that.
Right,
so that's
right. No, I think it's
yeah.
good you ask it so we can respond.
There are lots and lots of families that have said, in this home, we go to church, in this home, we go on missions. That's what we do. And that does not make them bad parents, and that does not make the kids... I mean, if the
serial
kids...
bombers.
Yeah.
Well, another thing I want to point out... Oh, did I interrupt you?
Nope.
Another thing I want to point out is that it's interesting because watching it, and people who follow my podcast know I'm a nuanced member. I'm finding my way through, but I'm very much a member and very active and faithful. But I think that one thing that has bothered me, even as a nuanced member, is this implication that Mormonism bred this, that somehow this grew out of Mormonism. And I think that's so unfair or backward. Actually, Mark was a nihilist from early on. Like in the interviews they did with him, he's like, why do people care so much? I put them out of their misery. They're out of pain. Like, why do people care that they're dead?
You're talking about the people he killed.
Yeah, like about Kathy Sheets and Scott Christensen. He's like, I put them out of misery. They're not in pain. Like he was
compassionate to kill them.
He was a nihilist. He did not believe in God. He did not believe in, and so actually, like, his parents are a better example of the best of Mormon, or of what Mormonism can be than he is. He's not.
So if Mark had been raised Catholic, he'd go after the Pope or something. Right? Or Methodist or whatever.
If it were
the religion,
he was going to be someone who was going to be narcissistic, Machiavellian, and psychopathic. That's who he was.
See, when you look at the sum total of what he unearthed or found,
or created,
that's so much of it was to destroy faith,
right,
and to destroy the people around him and to tear down. But I don't think it was because of any deep-seated hatred against Mormonism. I think it was more to be...
I think he hated humanity, and Mormonism was his humanity, and Mormonism was his vehicle to be the superhuman he saw himself as, he needed to be.
And that's in part, there are two ways that you can look at it when he wore his Letterman jacket.
Well, you tell because I grew up with you telling me your perspective, then I'll tell what I told you.
As I thought about it, I think yours is probably more accurate. I always wondered if he had been promised protection, and
like a satanic pact, kind of.
Yeah, and that even after he was arrested, he was so confident and flip and glib about everything. I just wondered if he had been told, "Hey, I've got your back. You do this, and we've got your back."
Who's got his back?
Satan.
Yeah, that's what Diane thought. Like, really, she thought that he was
like he gave his soul to Satan.
Yeah, something. Yeah, and my take was different because I grew up hearing you say that, but I was like, because it's so weird. He was a smart guy. He wore his Letterman jacket to go deliver the bombs. And other things.
And this is when he's like 30 years old, right?
Yeah. It was when he was blowing people up. Yeah, he was like well known. Everyone knew he had a green leather, and plus he was 30. Yeah, he was 30 in his 30s wearing his high school chess club Letterman jacket. Like, that's cool. But anyway, I really think that his his modus operandi, am I saying that right, was to fool people and then to laugh at them. That at the beach, he wasn't content to just fool the kids and go, oh, I don't know. He had to have it known. So I think it was killing him to be the world's best forger and not have anyone know how brilliant he was. I think he's had to get caught in order to, if he had just been this rare document finder, none of us would know him or know his name, right? But knowing him as like the all-time greatest forger who then blew people up, we all know his name. And I think that was important to him. I'm wondering if he was conflicted, but that's what I think, you know? I don't know.
Well, it brings up another question, because the question is, when that third bomb went off, was it a suicide attempt or was it an accident?
Absolutely not a suicide attempt, in my opinion.
I don't think so.
I think he's still enjoying knowing that there are documents floating around.
That had to be painful, though, because he lost part of a couple fingers.
It wasn't supposed to blow up. I think he was going to deliver another bomb. You go ahead, sorry.
No. And
But, I mean, he knew when he was 14 or however old he was, when that chemistry set blew him up, he knew what those burns felt like.
yeah,
Can you see
he
him
wasn't
doing that
trying
again?
to commit
So
suicide.
you think it was an accident?
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. How could somebody that was that narcissistic and had been that successful for that long all of a sudden decide,
He wasn't done. He wasn't done fooling people.
no.
Well, but I mean,
hadn't
he was
gotten
under
to
a lot
laugh
of
in their
pressure at the
faces.
time,
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because he had that $189,000 loan.
Right,
But
right.
see, that whole trajectory was not a sustainable path. I think somewhere it had to come to an end because it had to be known what
But
he
the end
had
was
to laugh in
most-
people's face.
And if you commit suicide and
You
there
don't get
is no
that.
God, how do you, as far as he was concerned, how would you get that last laugh?
How do you get that big reveal?
Well, I mean, because there's the other thing. When I talked to George Throckmorton, he was the detective that figured out how Mark was forging documents and everything. And one of the things that he said, you know, they had that plea deal, and as part of the plea deal, he was supposed to tell how he was forging the documents and all the inside information, and he never did that. Because he hated the police
Well,
chief
and a
or
magician
something.
never reveals his tricks. You lose the power over people to some extent too, if you can't.
And
Well,
you
and so
also-
that's my question is, because you're like, well, he had to let people know that he did it,
That it was him, not how he did it, but that
but he still wanted to keep that secret then.
I mean, of course we can all speculate, but if you look at his pattern on the beach with his dad, like on and on and on, for him the payoff was, you are such idiots. That was the payoff, and I think that he couldn't. I mean, just
He
I
still didn't
imagine
wanna
there was
reveal his tricks.
tension. There was tension in there with like, no one knows how brilliant I actually am. I think that was driving him crazy.
And I don't know where I heard this, but somehow in the family it was floating around that last bomb was going to be at the church office building for
I
President Hinckley.
heard that too. But maybe that's.
But we don't know. I don't know where the source of that was, but that was the direction that he had been going on that.
And
Who
that
knows?
could just be people speculating, and it got passed around, so we don't.
Yeah, my understanding is most people think it was for Brent Ashworth. He was supposed to meet with Brent that day, but Brent was scared and didn't go to lunch. Good for Brent.
Yeah, I don't have any idea. By that time, I mean, there had been no contact for years and years.
Yeah.
I want to tell our funny family story, if that's okay. I hope it's okay. Is it okay? Well, this is funny
I
because
have
I
to
was a
say
little
it.
girl. I want to say it. I was just a little girl. So how I grew up learning about this was, so Diane's the oldest, and the third is our sister Janae, who has cerebral palsy. I'll let you say it. Fine.
She functions on about a 6-year-old level.
She's darling.
And
She's
she
so,
is so
like,
sweet.
We just love her, and she always has to. All of the kids know how to talk like Aunt Janae, and like, how
She's
are
so
you?
funny,
Like,
and-
she's
and-
just fun.
So She, for a while, lived in a group home down in Utah County.
So she knew Mark too, right? Because she's in
She
that
kinda
same
grown
age
up
group.
with
So
him,
she
yeah.
was at the family reunions every year. Yep.
And my brother went to pick her up and bring her home.
So she was in a
And-
group home in Utah County. My parents lived in Salt Lake County.
And as he drove up around Point of the Mountain, she looked out the window and said, "Hi, Mark."
So
Hi, Mark. That was it.
I grew up because we would drive her back to. I would ride with my mom to drive her back to a group
Every
home, and every
time
time we passed the Point of the Mountain, "Hi, Mark." And so that's how I was like, oh, I have a cousin named Mark Hofmann who's in prison at the Point of the Mountain, who
Yeah.
blew people up apparently.
But
So to
Anyway,
me,
that's just
a
a-
fun family story that we still like. So like it still will come up, "Hi, Mark," when someone drives around the Point of the Mountain, because I don't think he's even there anymore, but he
No,
was
he's in
at the
Gunnison
time.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just been part of our family, is what it's just
Yeah.
been part of our like. Oh, Mark Hoffman's my head cousin. If I ever wanted to impress kids in seminary, I could tell them.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Diane Smith and Michelle Stone. In our next conversation, Michelle will talk about whether the Mark Hofmann bombings are a sore spot with family.
Well, and I think it's just, and in any case, every time it's brought up, I think we all just feel concern for Aunt Lou. That's, and I don't know, Mark's sisters, and so I don't know how it's affected them, but it's the mom.
Thanks for listening to Gospel Tangents. If you'd like to support me, please subscribe at gospeltangents.com or on patreon.com/gospeltangents, or you can watch entire videos at youtube.com/gospeltangents. I really can't do this without your support. I'd love to do it full time, and I need a lot more people that are willing to help me out. So I'd really appreciate that. So thanks again for listening, and don't forget to check out some of our other videos.